My name is Keron Alleyne. I'm a candidate for New York State Assembly running to represent the good folks of the 60th Assembly District, which encompasses the majority of East New York, all of Starrett City, parts of Canarsie and Brownsville. I'm a lifelong resident of the neighborhood. I've been here since I was a very, very small child. I got my educational foundation at Public School 202, went to Boys and Girls High School, went to college, came back home, got extremely involved in all sorts of community happenings. I volunteered for a local organization working with overage middle school students, and I just kept doubling down on community. Kept getting more involved, was appointed to the community board, voted on the East New York rezone, voted it down because it wasn't a true affordable plan for our community. I'm a local community gardener. I've been growing food at 400 Montauk Community Garden for the past 6 years at the helm of the space, trying to improve fresh food access in the community. I currently have the role of the Deputy District Manager at Brooklyn Community Board 5, responding to community issues that folks call and email and try to reach out to our office in reference to, and really just work on building community. You know, I've formed the block associations, I've hosted block parties. I'm raising my 5-year-old son here, married to my wife, and I truly love the community and I want to see it prosper.
You are a very involved community gardener in East New York, as you've just mentioned, and now running for the 60th district. What made you think, I want to leave gardening and run for public office?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm leaving gardening at all, because that's something I will always be planting seeds and growing community. When you get involved in any garden, a community garden space, one of the things you realize pretty early on is that you're not just growing plants and food, you're growing community, you're growing people. And going with that same mindset, as a gardener, and as someone who's heavily involved in the community, you see so many things that you really recognize how systemic issues affect our community and how much more impact we can and should be making. And communities like ours deserve and should have elected officials who are going to be fully accountable to the community, unbought and unbossed, you know, growing to some degree like a grapevine. If we're gonna make a comparison, grapevines go where they want. They're unchained, they're unbought and unbossed, they can't be caged, and they produce fruit. To some degree, I'm making a comparison that not everyone will understand, but it's too important this time, going through COVID, going through episodes of police brutality, all of the things that we're going through, mass shootings, et cetera, et cetera. It's too important this time for us to have elected officials who are gonna go along to get along and to really piecemeal change, piecemeal differences in our lives. We need the whole thing. This is why we need radical change.
You talk about radical vision, radical action, radical change to East New York, and that you are running to bring radical change. Why radical? And what kind of radical change do you want to bring to East New York?
Great question, Florence. Why radical has been a question that I've been asked a lot. And again, I think our time really speaks to it. We live in a time where we're 2+ years in a global pandemic, where we've watched our neighbors, friends, and families get afflicted with COVID and die. And within that same scope, nobody's talking about universal healthcare and making that a reality for our communities, not only in East New York, but across the state, making sure that everyone has access to healthcare. We also live in a time where student debt is at its highest peak. You got all types of folks walking around here with $90,000+ in debt. Student debt as a whole is in the billions or trillions at this point. So why not push to make our CUNY and SUNY infrastructure free? the way it used to be. That's radical. And as it currently stands, the state legislature is piecemealing the change that we truly need. They're piecemealing the things that are going to make our lives radically different. It's only when the quote that I live by, power concedes nothing without a demand, by Frederick Douglass. And that quote speaks to what radical is. We need to get to the root causes of the issues within this capitalist system. And to have an elected official who's not going to be worried about who donated to my campaign, real estate, special interests, manufacturing, to have an elected official like me who will be unchained in that respect and will go to bat for our communities, not only in the 60th Assembly District, but all across the state, who are afflicted by the most issues. That's what radical change, that's what radical action is, and that's why we need it.
You lost the special election against Miss Nikki Lucas in February. How confident are you that you will win this time around?
I'm extremely confident. The special election was an extremely difficult time and task for a lot of people. If you recall, that Omicron wave was relatively high and at its peak, and we wanted to be extremely safe while still canvassing and speaking with folks in the streets. We're going into a Democratic primary right now, where everyone's a Democrat. In special elections, as you know, Florence, there can only be one person who has a Democratic Party line, and the party chooses whoever they can control. That's usually what ends up happening. We did put up a formidable fight on the Working Families Party line, which was absolutely amazing. We got 20% of the vote. We got a bunch of Democrats to move to a different party line, which is extremely special. And although we didn't get the result that we wanted, we didn't lose. There was a lot that we won in that process. And coming in second in that regard is no issue. We just built more momentum for this movement as we go into this June primary. So I'm very, very confident.
Low turnouts are common in special elections, as we all know. How do you think a high turnout in the primary may impact the results that you got the last time?
I think the high turnout brings out more people who now have to differentiate between two names, because this is a Democratic primary. This is not a general election. It's not a special election where people they just go and they say, all right, in districts like ours where there's 90% Democratic, they go to the polls in special elections and in general elections and just vote for Democrats. Going into a primary and having to familiarize yourself with names, positions, and people make a difference. And I think when community members look at my platform, look at what I stand for, look at my track record as a community member, literally one of them, they'll say, yeah, we're definitely going with Keron Alleyne.
You are running on affordable housing, education, higher education, healthy communities, criminal justice, and transportation equity. Why did you decide to choose these among all the issues facing the people of East New York?
Yeah, so I chose these from knocking on doors, from having conversations with elders, from having conversations with young people, from having conversations with my peers, and a lot of the issues that community members bring up, whether it's around feeling safe and what community public safety looks like. These are the things that I hear when I hit doors. When we talk about education and parents wanting universal childcare, making it a bit easier for the parents, the Black women within our neighborhood to have childcare so that they can do the things that they need to provide for their children. These 6 pillars of the 60th are essentially the community's platform. True affordable housing. As the Deputy District Manager in Community Board 5, every year we do a district needs assessment. every year, true affordable housing has been what has come up. I've worked many, many years with Councilmember Barron and at the time Assemblymember Barron to make sure that the community had affordable to the local population housing. So all of these pillars, these issues, and the platform that I'm running on is based on what the people want.
I know you've already said a little about gardening. Tell me a little bit more about the community garden system that you restored and restarted and are so involved in East New York. Why is community gardening so important in the community at this time?
Florence, I am so glad that you are asking about gardening. I'm seriously, gardening is so important. We're urban farmers, we're community gardeners. We're doing something that does not happen in cities. So 6 years ago, when I took over at 400 Montauk Community Garden, I didn't know much about gardening. But if you know about the history of East New York, there's over 57 community gardens in the neighborhood, which probably is the most throughout the entire city, especially when you look at the size and scope of them. When I took over at 400 Montauk, my history of community gardening is actually fairly common in the neighborhood. My grandfather would take me to community gardens on the block. At the time, there were 3 before development, of course, replaced the spaces. And in growing food in the community and growing people, the quote that I also live by, you're gonna keep hearing this, I got a lot of quotes, is more grows in the garden than the gardener plants. So you might think that you're just putting down these seeds to grow something and then something else pops up that might complement, help, assist it. It's the same thing with this entire community apparatus. When we think about the garden system within East New York, last year throughout the pandemic, we formed the East New York Garden Advocates. The East New York Garden Advocates is a platform formed for gardeners by gardeners. We have once a month meetings on Zoom where we address community needs. So I know folks are probably like, why is he so fixated on the gardens? The gardens are run by seniors who throughout the pandemic were mostly affected and couldn't really participate in their spaces in the way that they would have liked. The East New York Garden Advocates became a community vehicle to support seniors in their growing needs. And as we continue to go forward, it's the same thing, while simultaneously impacting the neighborhood health profile. Our community is #1 in adult diabetes, pretty high in obesity. The only way to combat it in an inner city food desert is to get your hands in the ground and grow food. And that's why I do gardening. That's why I love it. My son loves it. for the 6 years of his life, he's been in the space as well.
Wow. And you seem so passionate and talk a lot about growing the community. What does community mean to you?
Community is everything, Florence. Community, I like to put it like this. I first learned about community from my grandmother. As you know, my parents came to this country from Trinidad. My mother's parents from Grenada. My father's parents from Tobago. And from my grandmother, my mother's mother, her sense of community, I would always see it firsthand. She was the neighborhood caretaker for all of the babies of the family. You know, she would watch all of us. When you came, you couldn't leave with your belly empty or your hands empty. She always had something to provide. Mind you, my grandmother, as long as I've known her, she did not have the ability to walk. So she wasn't working, but she always had to give. And I feel like that's what community is. She taught me that at a very, very young age. And because of her condition at the time, what that also taught me was equity. You know, making sure that everybody has for where they're at to create some level balance with how they see and feel about themselves in the world and in a greater neighborhood. And community is all of that. My grandmother, in her being, she's no longer with us. Unfortunately, she passed away last year, but she taught me all about community. And what I realized, of course, is a lot of that is ingrained in me by default of seeing her, knowing her, and loving her.
That's so good to hear. And you are running under the umbrella of the Working Families Party. Why?
I have to pull back a bit more. So I'm in the local community. There's a local social political organization known as Operation Power. Power is an acronym. It stands for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect. That's where I gained my political foundation. There were so many things that Operation Power is leading within the community. It's comprised of tenant associations, block association, representatives, just a little bit of everything in terms of all of the local happenings with political education. I was first running as a power candidate and still am a power candidate. Getting the Working Families Party endorsement was absolutely instrumental and so important. They have some of the same values when you think about communities like ours that we definitely found some extreme solidarity in. And the Working Families, as a working family man, the Working Families Party is absolutely a great partner in everything that we hope to achieve in the community. And they have been nothing but stellar and supportive in all of our endeavors and trying to make winning this seat a reality.
Where do you stand on abortion rights? If the Supreme Court strikes down Roe v. Wade, what do you think Democrats should do about it in the upcoming midterms, both in the state and the federal levels?
So a woman should always have a right to choice. You know, they should always have an opportunity, if they choose to abort, to do so. It would be a catastrophic failure for the state legislature and a state like New York to be supposedly all blue and all for women's rights, to not have protections in place for women all across the state, within our district, Black women, to have access to safe and healthy abortions, where, you know, as a state legislature, there's always more that can be done. You know, the states have their own powers to do something about everything that happens on the federal level. So as a state legislature, I'll make sure that my voice echoes what the needs of our local population in East New York need.
The current redistricting map in dispute involves, or the one that has already been approved, the final one came out, it involves Senate and congressional districts. How do you think the redrawing of this map is affecting the midterms in general?
Oh, its effect is it's felt all across the board, and it's affected across the board in this respect. We have two primaries now happening.
Yeah.
You know, you got August 23rd, and when you really think about it, yes, you know, you would hope that everybody is civically engaged and up to snuff and knows everything that's happening. But when we think about the society we live in, everybody is consumed in trying to survive, that it is sometimes extremely difficult to be civically engaged like you would want it to be textbook for most folks. So due to that, having two primaries, one at a time where everybody's probably going to be on vacation, is a really, really tough ask. This is possibly going to be a low turnout. It's going to affect communities like ours, where points of survival are even higher due to the society we live under. So it's going to be a tall order and a task, but if you're out there doing the work, you should be fine.
Yeah, and we also have to remember that taxpayers, it will cost taxpayers a lot of money too. to have 2 elections. So there's this last question before the time runs out. Do you think Democrats gerrymandered the redistricting process?
I think whoever's in charge at whatever time during census years, do what's in their best interest. And at the end of the day, we really just want whole communities and elected officials who are going to be responsive to needs. Gerrymandering, no matter who does it, it's just playing with the lives of people who really need what state lawmakers, federal lawmakers, city lawmakers are supposed to be in office for, making a difference in the lives of people.
So thank you so much. Those are all the questions I had for you. So
thank you so much, Florence. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to you over this platform. I appreciate the thoughtful questions. The fact that you wanted to know so much about gardening really warms my heart, to be quite honest with you. Growing food is therapeutic. Growing community is very, very difficult, but I'm up for the task. Thank you.